Modani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta binishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha
Modani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta binishmati bechemla rabba emunatecha. Grateful am I as I stand before you, Spirit of the world, living Spirit of the world, the soul you gave. Your great faith in me. Your great faith in me. May I be grateful. May I be good.
Grateful am I as I stand before you, living Spirit of the world, the soul you gave me, your great faith in me. May I be grateful, may I be good.
You just heard, and maybe sang along with some of our Mensch kids and families singing the prayer Modani. When we created Mensch Academy 4 years ago, I thought a lot about rituals. Mensch Academy was brand new. We were starting it from the ground up. So we had no schedule and no set rituals in place that had to happen. Obviously, we were going to have a musical prayer, tefillah, experience as part of Mensch Academy. This is Mishkan after all. But which prayers would we say and why? As I thought about this and talked it out with Rabbi Lauren and Rabbi Lizzie, I kept going back to the core values of Mensch Academy. My dream was that at its center, Mensch Academy would be a place where kids and families felt loved enough and safe enough to take risks and develop their own Jewish ideas and their own Jewish selves. Which prayers and rituals would help them get there? And then we moved to virtual. The Mensch team has spent the past few months thinking about how we adapt our rituals to the virtual space and how we create new ones. Now, more than ever, we need our rituals. It's easy to forget what day it is, what month it is, even what season it is. I have found that I need rituals to help mark the time for me and to help remind me that I'm human. to help make me feel secure and safe. We started each session with the familiar nine, 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 that then led into Modani. And I watched kids' faces in their Zoom squares light up with recognition. They knew these prayers. They knew these voices. I watched as so many of the Mensch kids, some who rarely sang out loud in person, moved their mouth singing out loud. In this difficult time, more than ever, we need rituals. And often they aren't even the same rituals we've had in the past, but new ones, things that make sense for us right now. At Mensch Academy, our team has been meeting over the past month, creating new rituals and new ways of being with kids that can help them feel loved and safe and supported, even online, and even in a pandemic. Now is the time to continue our previous rituals while also creating new ones that help remind us and center us within our values. I invite you to take a deep breath, pause, and think about your own routines and rituals. What routine do you already have that gives you the opportunity to pause and be grateful? I always mean to pause and drink my morning coffee quietly while reflecting on my day, gratitude, but I have kids at my house, and so that rarely happens. Instead, I happen to have a daily planner, and in it, there are daily prompts asking me what I'm grateful for. And so every morning when I sit down at my desk, I see the planner there, and I write my gratitudes. It's not as beautiful and peaceful looking as I would like with the coffee image, but it's still something, and it works for me right now. And that's what's important. If you feel comfortable, you could share in the chat something that helps you become present and grateful as you start your day. Shana Tova.
Barchi, barchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol kravai et shem kodsho. Barchi, barchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol kravai et shem kodsho. Ha'el b'tatzumo zuzecha Hagadol b'chvod shemecha Hagibor lanetzach V'hanora v'norotecha Ha'melech hayoshev al kiseh ram v'nisa Ha'el b'tatzumo tuzecha Hagadol b'chvod shemecha Hagibor lanetzach Ram v'nisa Barchi, barchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol kravai et shem kodsho. Barchi, barchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol kravai et shem kodsho. Ha'el b'tatzumo tuzecha Hagadol b'chvod shemecha Hagibor lanetzach V'hanora v'norotecha Ha'melech hayoshev al kiseh ram v'nisa Ha'el b'tatzumo tuzecha Hagadol b'chvod shemecha Hagibor lanetzach Ram v'nisa. Last time. Barchi, barchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol kravai et shem kodsho. Barchi, barchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol kravai et shem kodsho. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. We can take a seat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzer or uvorei choshech Osei shalom uvorei et hakol Or olam ba'otzer chayim Orot me'ofel amar vayehi. You spoke and light emerged from darkness, light precious to life, life that is eternal. And we pick up with the blessing for light. Bottom of 127. Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'nizkeh chulanu mehera le'oro. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer ha'me'orot. I invite you to gather the four corners of your tzitzit around you. As we connect with the most powerful and important of all of the metaphors for what God is, who God is, the experience that God is, which is ahava rabbah, great, big, abundant, powerful love. So go ahead and just chant after me. First two words of this blessing. Ahava, ahava, ahava rabbah, ahava rabbah, Ahava, ahava, ahava rabbah, Turn to the blessing on 129. Baruch atah Havaya Habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava Habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על אלוהיך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, ושבתך ביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשופך ובחומך וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Good morning, Shana Tova. A few weeks ago, my son started daycare again. And while we had thought he's going to be so happy, he's going to go, he's going to see all his friends, he's going to play with all these new toys, he's just going to be thrilled, the truth was he protested going. He didn't want to get out of the car, and then when we got to the door, he didn't want to go inside. And we kind of didn't know what to do about this. He missed us. He wanted to hang out at home. He had gotten very used to 6 months of hanging out with us, with his baby sister. He didn't want to be in a new environment with lots of cool toys and all of his friends. And so the director of the daycare sent us a note and said, it would be helpful if you could remind him that you too went through this once, that you too were scared and went to school and didn't know what to expect, and that it was okay, it was great, that you learned, that you grew. Remind him that you went through this yourself, and it will help him know that he can do it too. It's working. It's working. I think also just time is working. What we are about to do now is we enter into Mi Chamocha, which then leads right into the Amidah, is we remind ourselves as a people that we can do hard things. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, who I mentioned at Rosh Hashanah, the rabbi who talks about the dream, how the Jewish people are carriers of a dream, and that dream is the Garden of Eden, a world that looks and feels and smells and tastes like the Garden of Eden, a world of harmony and peace and coexistence between peoples, between humanity and nature. That this is a dream that we have to hold in our mind at the very same time, the world as it could be, at the very same time as we live in the world as it is. And he says, how is it that we as a people can do this, can have the audacity to believe that a different world than the one that we are in is possible? This is a staggering pedagogic challenge, he said. And so it requires daily reminders, multiple times a day, that we have done hard things before. That is what Mi Chamocha is here to take us into, to remind us that you, your people, your spiritual ancestors, your actual ancestors, and also your spiritual lineage lets you know you can do it because it has been done before. Our people, as bad as Egypt was, were somehow comfortable in our misery. We knew where our food was coming from. We knew where the roof over our heads was. It took plagues, it took darkness, it took death to somehow get us to believe that we could leave, that we could change reality. Michael Walzer, the historian and political commentary writer, says, wherever you are, it is probably Egypt. Wherever you are, it is probably Egypt. And the only way through and the only way out is to join hands and to start marching. Mi Chamocha is our reminder that we have done hard things, and our reminder that we can stand up and join hands and start marching toward a new reality, that miracles are possible. Maimonides says a miracle isn't showing you what's impossible. A miracle actually is just showing you what is possible. Holding the dream right in front of you and knowing we might not get there right away, but it is possible. Keep marching. So after Mi Chamocha, which we do in the tune of Bob Marley's Redemption Song, because Bob Marley too was inspired by this vision of the Exodus, of knowing that hard things had been done before and could indeed redeem even the darkest evil of chattel slavery, that redemption is possible. And so Mi Chamocha is like our redemption song. And we sing it together, and then we will stand for the Amidah, where we locate all of those prayers for the world that we want to birth into existence, that is not actually an impossibility, but a possibility just waiting to be born.
Mi Chamocha Ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha Nedar B'Kodesh, Norah Tehilot Hosefele, Norah Tehilot Hosefele.
Won't you help to sing these songs of freedom? It's all I ever had. Redemption song. Shira Hadasha, Shivehu Geuni, Leshimcha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chazdei Avot V'Imahot U'Mevi Goel Livnei B'neihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava Misod Chachamim U'Nevonim U'Milemedat Mevinim Eftach Hafi V'Tfilah V'Tachanunim Lechalot U'Lechanen Pnei Melech Malei Rachamim Adonai Ha'adonim Zoreinu Lechaim Melech Hafetz B'Chaim V'Chotveinu B'Sefer HaChaim L'ma'ach Elohim Chaim Melech Ozer u'Mosheh u'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham u'Foked Sarah Amen Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai Mechayei metim atah Rav lehoshia Morid atah Mechakeh chaim b'chesed Mechayei metim b'rachamim rabim Somech noflim v'rofeh cholim U'matir asurim U'mekayem emunato Lishenei afar Mi chamocha Ba'al gevurot Umi domelach Melech meimit Umechayeh Umatzmiach Yeshua Mi chamocha Avarachamim Zocher Yetzurav Lechaim Berachamim Lechaim Berachamim V'neheman atah lahachayot metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei hametim Amen Atah v'chartanu mikol ha'amim v'afta otanu v'retzita banu v'romamanu mikol ha'lashonot v'kiddashtanu b'mitzvotecha v'kervatanu malkeinu levoratecha v'shimcha hagadol hakadosh aleinu karata v'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu ba'ahava את יום הכיפורים הזה למחילה ולסחילה לכפרה. You lovingly gave us this day of Yom Kippur, a day of forgiveness, of pardon, of cleansing, a day which provides forgiveness for our sins against you, the ones we did to each other. That's what we need to figure out now. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה את יום הכיפורים הזה למחילה ולסחילה ולכפרה ולמחול בו את כל עוונותינו מקרא קודש זכר ליציאת מצרים.
Four years ago, at High Holidays, I said a racist thing from the Bima. And it was so subtle that of the 1,200 people who were there in the house that day, nobody noticed. And it was so obvious that there was one woman who got up, left her seat, and walked into the lobby and started crying. And I only know this because there was somebody who saw her, somebody whose wedding I'd done a few months earlier, who walked up to her and said, "Hey, are you okay?" And this young woman, a professor, a Black Jew from the East Coast, said, "No, I'm not okay. I feel like the rabbi just erased me." And this person whose wedding I had done said, "I know the rabbi. Could I let her know?" And thankfully, this professor said, "Yes, you can let her know." And that's how it came to pass that I got a chance to sit down with her and actually hear out of her mouth the way in which I'd hurt her and anyone else in the room who was coming from the perspective of a person of color. And I was fully prepared to lose her over this comment. I had hurt her and I had been incredibly insensitive. Admittedly, I didn't even realize it. 1,200 people in the room didn't realize it, but that actually sort of drives the point home even further. Part of my shame in that moment was that Mishkan's whole claim to being a radically inclusive space felt like a sham. It felt like it was a radically inclusive space for white Jews. Jewish spaces, even the ones professing to be and striving to be radically inclusive, are still overwhelmingly white and governed by mostly Ashkenazi traditions and assumptions, music, food. And we are leaving people out, 500,000 or more in this country. And we're creating communities in which kids, like the woman I described above, aren't growing up and seeing themselves reflected back to them in the leadership of their synagogues. We are perpetuating institutions in which rabbis and leaders, even the well-meaning among us, hurt people through our ignorance of the experience of Jews of color and what you, need to feel safe and seen and valued in Jewish community. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha, for the sin that we have committed by being racist. The medieval Jewish philosopher Maimonides says in Hilchot Tshuva, the laws of repentance, that when you've committed a sin against God, you take it up with God privately. You don't go around telling people of what a failure you've been to keep kosher, to keep Shabbat. Take it up with God. But for the sins that you've committed against another person or against another people or people, you've got to claim it out loud. You've got to say it. We need to confess. We, the Jewish community, need to confess out loud. We need to own the ways in which we've hurt people in our own community, Jews of color and people of color in general. We need to own the ways in which we've prioritized white needs above the needs of people of color in Jewish space, yes, but not only in Jewish space. And we do this not because confessing solves the problem. It's not that easy, but because, as Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, says, the heartbeat of racism is denial. I'm not a racist. I'm not part of racist things. I'm colorblind. Denial. And therefore, the heartbeat of anti-racism is confession. So the 7 communities of the Jewish Emergent Network over the past 30 days have been participating in an anti-racist curriculum designed by Yavila McCoy, who is herself a modern Orthodox Black Jewish diversity trainer. And in this 30-day challenge called Confessions of the Heart, taken from the liturgy of the High Holidays, we've been watching short videos, listening to podcasts, reading a piece, reflecting, journaling on the ways in which we participate in white supremacy, knowingly and unknowingly. And not just white Jews, but also Jews of color, and exploring together how we might grow more loving, more just, and less racist in the year to come. Part of this curriculum is confession. So this vidui, al chet, that we're about to go into is for the sins of racism. If the heartbeat of racism is denial, then the heartbeat of anti-racism, not just being neutral, but actually being anti-racist, is confession. So this year, we, Mishkan, we signed a letter called Not Free to Desist, which was written by Jews of color who are leaders of Jewish organizations. And it commits us to taking active steps toward dismantling the white supremacy that exists even here in this radically inclusive Jewish community, to start off on a path of true diversity and equity, to have more representation of the actual Jewish community on our board, our staff, and in our community. This isn't something that will happen by accident. It's something that will happen as we take active steps toward collectively admitting where we have missed the mark and how we will not repeat those mistakes in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and read down this list, and I invite you to join me. This is going to be in English, so you can read every single word of these out loud. And like the other confessions, it's going to go fast, and you're not going to have the time to really delve into the depth of each one of these. We're going more for quantity than quality, but that's with the hope and expectation that this will spark a process for you, will wake up within you awareness that you will follow up on over the course of this day and over the course of this year. So as we go through these, as we strike our chest and say each one of these out loud, I invite you to think about what you may want to have a conversation with somebody who you trust later today or sometime next week about, and see how we together may actually make our community and our world less racist in the coming year. For the sins that we have committed through conscious and unconscious racial bias, for the sins we have committed through hardening our hearts for the need for change, for the sins of colluding with racism, both openly and secretly, for the sins we have committed through uttering racist words, for the sins we have committed through acts of racial microaggression, for the sins we have committed through insisting on urgency and perfectionism as a measure of human value. I am saying al chet. Let's just do this without the tune. For the sins we have committed through the denial of Tselem Elohim, the divine spark within Black bodies. For the sins we have committed through segregating Black bodies from participation and leadership within our institutions. For the sins we have committed in deceiving others by not teaching our children the worth, value, and contributions of Black people. For the sins we have committed in not honoring and protecting the journeys of Black elders and Black children. For the sins we have committed in commoditizing Black people and Black bodies in our business dealings. For the sins we have committed in not caring for the ways that race and class intersect in our efforts to deepen community with Black people in Jewish spaces. For the sins we have committed through turning Black bodies into objects of lust and sexual gratification. For the sins we have committed through confessing our commitments to ending racism insincerely. For the sins we have committed that desecrate the divine name by allowing white supremacy habits to shape and determine our practice of Judaism. For all of these, we seek pardon, forgiveness, and atonement. For the sins of racism that we have committed knowingly and unknowingly, that continue to do damage to our siblings, children, families, and community. For the sins of racism we have committed through creating hierarchies of value between our siblings from Europe and those from the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. For the sins of racism we have committed through engaging in foolish racial talk and gossip in our places of worship. For the sins of racism we have committed through haughty demeanor and proud looks. For the sins of racism we have committed through glances of our eyes. For the sins of racism we have committed through passing judgment. For the sins of racism we have committed through baseless hatred. For the sins of racism we have committed through turning a blind eye to the pain and suffering around us. For the sins of racism we have committed by not seeing racism as an evil among us. For the sins of racism we have committed by not committing to end it. For all of these, we seek pardon, forgiveness, and atonement. Ve'al kulam Eloi selichot selach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu. May all of us be written and inscribed in the book of life. May joy and blessing follow our reflection, our atonement, and our commitments to living truth, reconciliation, and repair in our time. Amen.
I'm Rabbi Stephen. I was our first rabbinical intern back when Mishkan lived out of Rabbi Lizzie's trunk and my laptop. It is an honor to connect with each of you today, and amazing to see how much this community has grown. Today we are called to stand before the enormity of existence. The liturgy of Yom Kippur asks us to recognize our smallness, to see how we are but one part of a much larger world. We tend to live most of our lives believing that we are in control of our own small corner of the universe. But this year in particular, we have seen how the best laid plans can change in an instant, how we don't really know what tomorrow might bring. And in fact, very little of the world is within our control. There is a lot I imagine we would like to see different, that we would like to see changed for the better. We are at a time in which there is so much brokenness in the world around us, and we are called both by our inner empathic impulse and our tradition to meet that brokenness with empathy, with justice, with a desire for change. But faced with the enormity of the problems ahead of us and recognizing today our own ability to control so little of the world, what do? We call out Avinu Malkeinu, our parent, our sovereign. What is it possible for us to do? We are so small, and the world is so big. How can you change it all? Here's the thing. It's not up to you to change it all. There is no way that you have the power or the responsibility to do everything. And that's okay. So loosen your grip a little bit. Be gentle with yourself. Breathe. Let go of the idea that it is only up to you. We are not responsible for doing everything. Yet if you are alive right now, know that it is because the universe has conspired in such a way to bring you into existence at this very moment. For there is only something that you can bring into the world. If you are here right now, it is because you are needed. There's some small act that only you can give. There's some small kindness that only you can offer. There is a uniqueness, a talent, an ability that is only yours to give to this world in need. And so set aside that ego that tells you that you need to do it all, so you can create space to dig deeply into yourself and find that vital, bright, beautiful part of you, that unique and necessary thing that this world so desperately needs. We know, the history of our people tells us, that redemption comes as the cumulative effect of innumerable small acts. And so while it may not be up to any one of us to change everything, together, change is possible.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Ein lanu melech ela ata. Avinu Malkeinu, Aseimanu, Leman Shemecha. Avinu Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Ein lanu melech ela. Avinu Malkeinu,
want to invite you to look through the Machzor if you have it in front of you. And if you don't, look through the prayers and the hopes and the dreams and the yearnings that you have been nursing quietly, journaling about, speaking about, maybe even unaware of until this moment, but now invited to place them into this sort of open ark, this plea, Avinu Malkeinu, help us, forgive us, help us start again, help us get through this. What is the prayer that's on your heart, that's on your lips? So take a few moments now, if you want to read through Hebrew, the English on these pages. We'll come back together in a few moments and join each other to sing them into the heavens. Avinu Malkeinu,
Help us release any baggage from last year.
Avinu Malkeinu,
Cancel the thoughts of our enemies, nullify the desires of those who seek our
Avinu
harm.
Malkeinu, nullify the
Avinu
desires of
Prevent
those
Malkeinu.
us all tyrants and enemies.
ורעב ושבי ומשחית ועוון ומשמד מדי בריתך. אבינו מלכנו, סלח ומוחל לכל עוונותינו.
Inscribe us in your book for
אבינו
forgiveness,
מלכנו,
salvation.
ומחה ועבר פשעינו וחטאותינו מנגד עיניך. אבינו מלכנו, help us return to you fully in
That we are
tshuva.
but dust. Have
Avinu
compassion on
Malkeinu,
us and our families.
take care of our
Forgive us
children.
for the sake of those killed, declaring the holiness of your name. Forgive us for the sake of
Avinu
those slaughtered,
Malkeinu.
proclaiming your oneness.
Help us again be seen as people.
Transparent, compassionate,
Accept
ruler.
our prayers with grace and compassion.
Forgive us for
Praise
your sake, if not for
of
ours.
your name. Avinu Malkeinu, Asela Ma'an, Ba'esh, Ubamayim. Avinu בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה ניזכר וניכתב לפניך אנחנו לחיים טובים ולשלום We're about to begin the Torah service. Like every other part of this service for this High Holidays, it'll be a little bit different from the way we would be celebrating this if we were all together at the Vic. And there are some things that are going to be the same. We're going to take the Torahs out of the Ark. We're going to hug them. We're going to love them. We're going to dance in the streets with them. We're going to celebrate with Torah. Jews over the ages have gone to great, great lengths to be able to read and hear and, most importantly, study and internalize Torah. Torah is not just a book. It's not a scroll that has words written on it that we venerate like it's a god. You might think, the way that we celebrate it and hold it and look at it, that we're worshiping Torah. We're not worshiping Torah. We're worshiping God, the unity that flows throughout the universe, that connects all of us, and that inspires wisdom within us, and that has inspired the wisdom of our people, transmitted through the ages, in the form of Torah. Not limited to, but in this moment, that's sort of the embodiment that we hold. And so I want to invite you to, sort of reach out in the way that we might in a service, all in person, and get close with your finger to the computer screen. Mwah! And reach out as the Torah is passing and get a little kiss, get a little bit closer. The whole idea is that this is something that we as a people love and consider to be an expression of love from the divine. And the closer we get to it, even as we socially distance, as we dance and we sing, the closer we get, the more inspired and the more hopeful and the stronger we become. So let's get this Torah service started.
Kuma Adonai V'yafutzu oivecha V'yanusu misanecha Mipanecha Ki mitzion Te'etzei Torah Udvar Adonai Yerushalayim ay 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 Baruch Shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato ay 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 la 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 ay ay
Notzer chesed le'alav
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora shemo.
Gadlu Adonai iti uneromem Hashemo yachdav lecha Adonai ha'gedula ha'gevura v'hatifer v'hanetzach v'hahod tichom b'shamayim ובארץ לך אדוני הממלכה והנתנשא לכל לראש רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו לתורה לקדושים רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להקדוש Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu Adonai
Yay, Torah! Torah! Yay, Torah!
The Torah portion that we will read today details a list of sacrifices and actions that the high priest would undertake on Yom Kippur in the time of the temple. Things like sprinkling blood and tying strings around goats, things that feel so far from our time and place today. And yet, year after year, we still read these same portions. Not because we think that one year soon we're going to go back to tying a string on a goat and pushing it off a cliff, but because these things remind us that the work we're doing on Yom Kippur, the ethical soul searching, the connection that we make with ourselves and with others, is actually not enough. We need the ritual in addition to the personal actions that we take. Rituals don't always make sense to us. In fact, sometimes the best rituals are ones that specifically don't make sense, because their role isn't to explain things in our lives. Their role is to elevate our lives, to give them meaning in a different way. So there's actually something very soothing about having a formulaic ritual to settle into. It helps us disconnect our thinking brains, the ones that we engage when we do tshuva, when we connect to other people, when we do introspection and we beat our chests for our sins. Ritual helps us move out of that type of engagement with the world and move into a deeper part of our brain, our emotive, connective, primal experience. So as you read the readings today, I invite you to picture not just what's happening, but how it would transform you to be part of an experience like this, something that is visceral, something that is not understandable, and something that has to be undertaken in community.
And know that we are recreating these rituals in small ways today by showing up on Yom Kippur, so that all of the work that we've done over the last several weeks or hours becomes more powerful. It becomes an embodied experience, not just a memory of a thought, but a memory of an action that will then carry us to live differently in the coming year. So as we call these aliyot, if you feel like any of the groups that we mention speak to you, you say to yourself, yeah, I actually think that that applies to me too. Stand up, join for the aliyah. We'd love to know what you're doing, so share it in the chat. Also, just a brief time reminder that family services are set to start at 10:30. So do a quick time check and make sure that you click on that separate link if you're ready to join family services.
Wouldn't it be great if there was a priest who would just do the work for us, atone for us? Not how it works. For 2,000 years, we have been the priests of our lives. We are Mamlechet Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, the kingdom of priests and the holy nation, tasked with atoning for ourselves. And if it's a sin against God, so then making confession to God. But if it's a sin against another person, I got news for you, as we have discussed. No matter how many times you beat your chest in this service, that actually doesn't do the work. And what we learned from reading this parsha, as you'll see, is it's actually messy. The messiness of animal slaughter described in the parsha is mirrored by the emotional messiness of atonement, regret, reconciliation, tshuva in our lives. And we get to do that now. Once upon a time, there was a priest who did it, but we don't get that. Now we get to do it with and for one another. And that brings us to how we're going to call aliyot this morning. And this first aliyah is for the people who are guiding and leading our community, our board. And why and how is this connected to the parsha? Because a Jewish community, a spiritual community, is an intentional community. It is a group of people who decide to be part of this little creation, this vision of what the world could look like. And here at Mishkan, our mission is to help people find purpose and connection and inspiration, and to create a community in which people can bring their whole selves, with all of our messy differences, into dialogue with and community with, celebration with, support for one another. And that's what we've been doing for 9 years. Ya'amdu. May they stand, all of the members of Mishkan's board, including Mark Ackler, our current board chair, Lisa Portnoy, our incoming board chair, Jane Charney, our secretary, Elle Rosenberg, Hannah Bloom, Shira Marks, Adam Case, Avi Lewitis, Stephanie Cohn, and Michael Kornick. La'aliyah harishona.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natananu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
Amen. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe acharei mot shnei bnei Aharon v'korbatam lifnei Adonai vayamutu. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe Daber el Aharon achicha v'yavo b'chol eit el hakodesh mi beit la parochet el pnei hakaporet asher al ha'aron v'lo yamut ki
Be'anan era'eh al hakaporet. Bezot yavo Aharon el hakodesh. Bifar ben bekar. Lechatat ve'ayil le'olah.
Ketonet bad kodesh yilbash umiknese bad yihiu abisaro uvavne bad yakor umitznefet bad yitzno bigdei kodesh haim barachat b'mayim et bisaro uvesham ume'ed adat b'nei Yisrael Yikach Shnei Seirei Izim Lechatat V'ayil Echad Leolah V'hikriv Aharon Et Par HaChatat Asher Lo V'chiper Ba'ado Vad Beito.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
When you create a new Jewish community, when you create anything, there's a sense of purpose to it. There's a sense of this needs to exist for a reason. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. We'd all be somewhere else. And our raison d'etre, our purpose is to create a space where people can bring their whole selves to something bigger than themselves. A Jewish space where you can find a sense of what you're meant to do in the world, purpose, meaning, where you can find connection to other people, to God, to your deeper why, and finally to inspiration. And these people care so deeply about that mission. And I want to give a loving shout out to Mark, whose tenure as board chair is coming up, and say, you have been the exemplary board chair. You have been the best board chair anybody could have imagined or hoped for in my position. And I'm sure Rachel Court, who's not here recording this with me, but I'm sure she would agree if she were. There's a moment in the Torah where Moses is leading the Israelites into battle. And every time Moses puts his hands in the air, the Israelites are able to fight and they're able to prevail. And when Moses' arms fall, they fail as well. And so Aaron the high priest, who you just learned about, comes and puts a rock next to Moses so he can sit there and hold up Moses' arms. And this is like the kind of board chair, Mark, that you have been, somebody who is just incredibly supportive and not without moments of questioning and challenging, but always from a place of love and support. And I'm so grateful for your leadership these past 3 years. And you have always made yourself available. You are a busy guy with a ton of other things going on, with an organization that you run, with other boards that you sit on. You have never failed to make introductions, to send us articles, and mostly to answer the phone and be present in the most palpable and meaningful ways for all of us. So I want to say thank you. And Lisa, our treasurer, who is our incoming board chair, how excited we all are to see your star rise as our next board chair. And just to say to everybody on the board, thank you from the bottom of our heart. We couldn't do this without you. Rhonda Abrams, Rachel Court, Rabbi Dina Cowens, Ashley Donahue, Ilana Glacier-Bloom, Hannah Rehak, Ellie Spitz, Aviva Stein, Rebecca Stevens, Rabbi Jeff Stombach, who is now at the Well in Detroit, Zach Weinberg, Rabbi Lauren Henderson, who is now at Or Hadash in Atlanta, Anna Wolf, who is now in rabbinical school at JTS, Stephen Chapman, Ariel Dubois, Sterna Goldblum, Jordan Goldving, Katie Iber, Rachel Milan, Amy Nadel, Essie Shachar Hill, and Rabbi Allison Tick Brill. Welcome, come on up, and mostly just know how appreciated, valued, and loved you are by so many people whose lives you touch every day as you have graced and blessed this organization with your talent. Thank you.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
Amen.
אמן. ולקח את שני השעירים ומירותם לפני אדוני פתח אוהל מועד, ונתן אהרון על שני השעירים גורלות, גורל אחד לאדוני וגורל אחד לעזאזל. והקריב אהרון את השעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לאדוני, ועשהו חטאת. והשעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לעזאזל יעמוד חי לפני אדוני לכפר עליו, לשלח אותו לעזאזל המדברה. והקריב אהרון את בר החטאת אשר לו, וכיפר בעדו ובעד ביתו, ושחט את בר החטאת אשר לו.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam naftzotenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
We, in creating this Jewish project called Mishkan Chicago, get to have on our staff people whose training and talent comes from so many different backgrounds that it's actually quite astonishing how seamlessly the Judaism that we create together reflects all of the different inputs of experience that people are bringing. And I just feel so lucky to get to learn from you, our staff, every single day. You come with backgrounds in community organizing and engagement work and Judaism and communications and education and anti-racism and anti-oppression work and theater. Oh man, we've got a lot of theater happening at Mishkan Chicago right now, and social work. And did I already say music? And inclusion work and disability rights and conversion classes and I just feel so moved and grateful that we as a common project get to build a Jewish community that reflects our values and that reflects the kind of light that each one of you is capable of bringing into this world, and that Mishkan can be a platform for that. It's an honor. Do come forward, everybody who became a builder in this past Hebrew calendar year, La'aliyah Hashlishit. And if you've joined in the last 5 minutes or in the last couple of days and we didn't have the chance to invite you into this Aliyah, I invite you to stand where you are and join this Aliyah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
Amen. ולקח מלוא המקטע גחלי אש מעל המזבח מלפני אדוני, ומלוך אבניו כתור צמים דקה, והביא מבית לפרוכת. ונתן את הקטורת על האש לפני אדוני, וכיסה ענן הקטורת את הכפורת אשר על העדות ולא ימות. ולקח מדם הפר והיזה באצבעו על פני הכפורת קדמה, ולפני הכפורת יזה 7 פעמים מן הדם באצבעו, ושחט את שעיר החטאת אשר לם, והביא את דמו אל מבית לפרוכת, ועשה את דמו כאשר עשה לדם הפר, והיזה אותו על הכפורת ולפני הכפורת, וכיפר על הקודש מטומאות בני ישראל ומפשעיהם לכל חטאותם, וכן יעשה לאוהל מועד השוכן איתם בתוך תשומותם. וכל אדם לא יהיה באוהל מועד בבוא לקבר בקודש עד צאתו, וכיפר בעבדו ובעד ביתו ובעד כל קהל ישראל.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
So in this last year, almost 100 people became builders. People, couples, families joined our community. When we went into quarantine, we invited builders to make phone calls to one another just to check in. And almost 200 of you stepped forward and said, how can I help? And out of those phone calls came grocery store runs and food drop-offs and friendships and relationships that would not be possible if you hadn't stepped forward and said, here I am, Hineni, what can I do? Rely on me. We're living in a moment right now where you have options for how to experience spirituality. You can get online and for free, watch videos, hear music, be taken on spiritual journeys that really will be quite effective in, helping you tap that deep place of, spiritual connection, and will ask nothing of you. Won't ask you to put your name in a field or put your credit card number in or tell anybody who you are. We'll just let you remain completely anonymous. They won't bother you. You can have that experience and not be bothered. And to become a builder at Mishkan is to want to be bothered, or rather to want to not be anonymous in Jewish community, to want to be part of something, to step forward and say, Hineni, I'm here. What can I do? How can I contribute? And it's a really beautiful thing to see people actually doing that. And so if this sounds compelling to you, if you're watching this realizing, you thought what you wanted was high holiday tickets, and you'd come to high holidays and then go back to Jewing however you Jewed before, and that maybe, based on what you've seen and based on a little of what I have and other people have said, maybe you actually want to be part of something bigger than yourself, that's going to ask something, that's going to demand something of you in this coming year, that's going to involve you in the bigger project of building something that creates in the world a little corner of the world where we live and practice Jewish values in this particular way, in this style that is Mishkan Chicago. If you want to help build that, I invite you to join as a builder. The information's in the chat. Just click it, do it. I guarantee you won't be sorry. And I can't wait to welcome you with open arms. Virtual open arms for right now, but open arms eventually.
In the next Aliyah, we'll read about the continuation of the ritual of 2 goats. Spoiler alert, doesn't end very well for the goat who had the string tied around it and was supposed to carry off all the sins of the people Israel. On the flip side of the spectrum, this Aliyah, we'd like to honor those people who've helped carry our community since we went virtual in March. People who've hosted things like virtual Shabbat dinners and anti-racist book groups and meatless charcuterie board making and so much more. So please join us in honoring and thanking them for all that they've done to help carry this community. If you also have done something to help carry this community, whether that's showing up on a Friday night and singing your heart out in your own home or connecting with other people who need help, you're invited to also stand and join for this Aliyah. Ya'amdu, everyone who helps carry this community wherever and whenever they are, la'aliyah haravi'it.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
Amen. V'yatsa el hamizbeach asher lifnei Adonai v'chiper alav v'lakach midam hapar v'midam ha'sa'ir v'natan al karnot hamizbeach saviv v'hiza alav min hadam be'etzba'o sheva pa'amim v'tiharo v'kidsho mitumot bnei Yisrael v'chila mikaper et hakodesh ואת אוהל מועד ואת המזבח והקריב את השעיר החי ושמח אהרון את שתי ידיו על ראש השעיר החי והתוודע עליו את כל עוונות בני ישראל ואת כל פשעיהם לחוכתותם ונתן אותם על ראש השעיר ושילח ביד איש איתי המדברה ונשא השעיר עליו את כל עוונותם אל ארץ גזירה ושילח את השעיר במדבר ובא אהרון אל אוהל מועד ופשט את בגדי הבד אשר לבש בבוא אל הקודש והניחם שם ורחץ את בשרו במים במקום קדוש ולבש את בגדיו ויצא את עולתו ואת עולת העם וכיפר בעדו ובעד העם.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan ototenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen.
I want to take a moment now to honor everyone who survived something this year. This is sort of a break in between Aliyot. We have a blessing specifically for survival, for making it through something, a harrowing experience, maybe a long journey, maybe a car accident. You may be watching this and you know exactly who you are as I say that word survival, making it through something. You know who you are. You survived COVID. You got a clean report from your oncologist after a year of treatment. Maybe it'll take you a minute to realize you belong in this group. You survived a rough pregnancy, or you survived a failed pregnancy. You got out of an abusive relationship. You survived the death of someone who you really, really loved and relied on. I want to invite you, anybody who has survived something this year, to stand up, to recognize yourself, your strength, your resilience, your power. If you're in the room with other people, so allow them to celebrate and recognize you as well. If you're alone, know that we collectively will respond to you
as you say the blessing, recognizing having made it through something. So here's what's going to happen. Anybody who this applies to, you stand and you're going to say this blessing along with me. We'll print the words on the screen. And then for everybody who, this wasn't you this year, lucky you. You get to affirm and witness and celebrate everyone for whom this is the case by responding. And we will put those words on the screen as well. So I invite you to stand and say with me, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hagomel l'chayavim tovot, she'gmalani kol tov. And then everybody else say, Amen. Amen. Mi shigmalcha kol tov, hu yigmalcha kol tov selah. May the one who has been good to you continue to be good to you, continue to bless you and grace you. Amen. Okay, and now I want to take that energy of power and of strength and of survival and leverage it into our prayer for healing, into our Misha Berach. So as you bring to mind now people who are in need of this prayer, people in need of this blessing, people who we're praying for, I also want to bring into the room prayer for the people who are caring for and supporting the people who we're praying for. When we say the Misha Berach, it is often because we're sort of at our wit's end. We're at our abilities end. We've done everything we can do. We're not doctors. We can't prescribe medicine or do the surgery or do the physical or mental therapy necessary to help that person we're thinking about move from sickness into health. And so we think about them and we call them and we check in on them and we pray for them. And something we can do is support the people who are supporting them. Now I invite you to share people that you're thinking about, healers and those who are in need of healing. As we go into our Misha Berach, if you're thinking about somebody and you want to stand to say their name to sort of, even with greater power, say their name out into the world. So we are all holding all of those names and praying for every single one of their recovery.
In this next Aliyah, we'll read about the ritual that the person who brought the goat off to Azazel undergoes in order to come back into the encampment. It feels like the Torah's way of recognizing that there are people out there getting their hands deep into it in order to make things happen for the entire community. So for this Aliyah, we'd like to recognize and honor our organizing team, that small group of people who've been putting in the time week after week and month after month to help us as a community and to help individuals in the Mishkan community walk the walk of justice. So we'd like to honor them with this Aliyah, and we'd like to invite you to get more involved. In a few minutes, you'll hear a direct ask about one specific way that you can contribute to the campaigns that we've been working on. But we also want to ask you to fill out that spiritual pledge form, to let us know what excites you about making the world a better place, so that in the next year you can be like these people who take on important tasks for the community in order to do something bigger than each of us individually. Ya'amdu, the organizing team, la'aliyah ha'chamishit.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, notei haTorah. Amen.
Amen. Ve'et chelev hachatat yaktir hamizbecha v'amshaleach et ha'seir lazazel yechabes begadav v'rachatz et bisaro b'mayim v'acharei chen yavo lemachaneh ve'et par hachatat ve'et seir hachatat Asher huvat damam lechaper b'kodesh yotzi el mechutz lamachaneh v'sarfu va'esh et orotam vet b'saram vet pirsham v'hasaref otam yechabes b'gadav v'rachatz et b'saro b'mayim v'acharei chen yavo lamachaneh v'hayita lachem lechukat olam b'chodesh Hashvi'i ve'asur lachodesh tanu et nafshotechem v'chol malacha lo tasu hazrach ve'hager hagar betochechem ki v'yom hazeh yechaper alechem letaher etchem mikol chatotechem lifnei Adonai titaru Shabbat Shabbaton hi lachem V'initem et nafshotechem chukat olam v'chiper hakohen asher yimshach oto v'asher yimalet yado lechahen tachat aviv v'lavash et bigdei habad bigdei hakodesh v'chiper et mikdash hakodesh v'et ohel moed v'et hamizbecha Yechaper ve'al hakohanim ve'kol am hakahal yechaper ve'haita zot lachem lechukat olam lechaper al bnei Yisrael mikol chatotam achat bashana vayas kasher tziva Adonai et Moshe.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, notei haTorah. Amen.
Hi, my name is Ellie Crandall. I've been a member of Mishkan since 2010, and I've been a part of the Justice team since 2018. I wanted to take a minute today and talk to you about investing in your local ballot issues and local candidates during our upcoming election. It's really easy to get caught up in the many conversations about our national candidates, but the reality is that we have more power on local issues. Our voices are louder and more likely to be heard, and our individual vote makes a bigger impact. Change happens on a local level. This November, you, specifically folks living and voting in Illinois, have the opportunity to take a really simple action that will have a concrete impact on the lives of all Illinoisans. After much hard work and organizing, we get to vote this November on a fair tax in Illinois. Right now, Illinois has a flat tax, which means that no matter your income level, you pay 4.95% of your income in taxes. With a fair tax, also known as a progressive tax or a graduated tax, individuals with a higher income will pay a higher tax, and individuals with a lower income will pay a lower tax. Seems fair, right? If passed, 97% of Illinois will get a tax cut, and only those making over $250,000 a year will pay more in taxes. Illinois has a huge budget deficit, and has for as long as I can remember, due to a revenue crisis. The fair tax will raise $3.4 billion, yes, billion in revenue, which can support incredibly important causes such as housing, healthcare, education, mental health services, and so much more. As a Chicagoan, it's been really devastating to see the ongoing effects of our budget crisis. As a staff member at an interim housing agency, I saw firsthand the impacts of the lack of affordable housing for people in need. We have no safety net for individuals with mental health needs, for people who have lost jobs, for people who are really trying their best to survive in a system that is always against them, never for them. In this moment of uprising, as we recognize the pervasive racism throughout our country, both in our policies and in our hearts and minds, passing a fair tax is one small way we can begin to work towards true equity. We need money in our state budget if we're going to provide the critical services that all Illinoisans, especially Black and brown folks, have been denied for far too long. I urge you to check out the links on your screen to sign a fair tax pledge card saying that you will vote yes on the fair tax this November, to learn more about issues in your area, and to learn about candidates locally that you might not know about. We have seen time and time again how our local representatives and our local politicians make the key decisions that affect our everyday lives. No matter what issue you care about most, you have to start at the first level though, which is voting. And now I invite everyone to share in the chat one local issue that you commit to learning about or championing this year. Thank you so much. Shana Tova.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. Yada da 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 yada yada da yom. Yada 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 da yom. Yada yada do. Yada da da yada yada da yom. Yada 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 da yom. Yada yada do. Great waters pour over me, for I am your child. Make me yours again. Great waters pour over me, for I am your child. Make me yours again. Great waters pour over me. Heal my broken places. Make me whole again. Great waters pour over me. Heal my broken places. Make me whole again. great waters pour over me. For I am your child. Make me yours again. Yada da 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 yada yada da yom. Yada 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 da yom. Yada yada yom.
Thank you and Yasher Koach to all of our Torah readers. You are incredible. Bless you and thank you. We're going to turn now to our Haftarah, Isaiah. Before we go there, I want to zoom out for a moment. We'll zoom back in, I promise. People have asked me where the name for this community, Mishkan, comes from. It has everything to do with our mission and our vision of what we as an organization do and what Judaism can do in the world. So I want to describe this on two levels. The first level is very mundane, but really important. When we held our first service 9 years ago in Jacob's living room, we knew that we had a very diverse spread of backgrounds in the room and people who were comfortable with Hebrew and also really uncomfortable and unfamiliar with Hebrew. And so we wanted to figure out a name that would be accessible for the average person, whether or not they knew Hebrew, something that everybody could pronounce when reading it. Mishkan, Mishkan, maybe you're a Hebrew speaker, Mishkan, all good. Anybody listening who knows what the Mishkan was knows what you're saying when you say that word. Mishkan, the Mishkan in the Torah. So, okay, that's the first part, and it has to do with accessibility across backgrounds. The second thing, this is going a level deeper. What was the Mishkan in the Torah? What are we actually referring to? If you can imagine, or maybe you've seen this, when Cirque du Soleil comes to town and all of the trucks and all of the equipment and the poles and the fabric and the number of people and the effort and the vision and the organization that it takes to create this traveling space in which, once it is erected, the most incredible feats of human talent are on display and shared by thousands and thousands of people. That is what the Mishkan in the Torah was. It was this immense feat of human creativity and collaboration. And it wasn't that, at the end of a show, you felt God's presence. It was that God's presence infused all of that work and all of that collaboration and creativity, and also, what you experienced when you went in there. But it was not just, the work of one master designer, Moses. It was actually the collaboration of hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of people, bringing the best of themselves, contributing talent and also money to make this thing happen. That has been the founding ethos of Mishkan from the beginning. And, if you were around in those early days, and some of you were, it was very much like a clown car would, pull up to wherever we were having services, a living room in Lakeview, Diversey Harbor. Once we moved into our office here in Ravenswood, we've now moved office spaces 3 times in the same building. But a swarm of volunteers would, gather around my Honda Civic Hybrid, may its memory be a blessing, and, take boxes of Sidurim, of prayer books out of my car, and a big sandwich board sign that said Mishkan, and very often trays of food and blankets, and bring it wherever we were going. And we would set up, and we would daven, and we would eat, and we would sing, and we would pray, and then we'd sing more. And then at the end of the night, everybody would bring all the stuff back to my car, fold up shop, and we do it again next week. And there was a dynamism and a collaborative spirit to that was actually reminiscent of the ancient Mishkan. And I mention this now because 9 years later, even as we have a 2,000 square foot office space here in this building in Ravenswood, and we are a little more stable in terms of where we have services week to week, we don't switch it up every single time, we still value that creative spark that is required to constantly be on the move. And we've actually honed in on it even more. The more stable you are, the more necessary it is to consistently be experimenting and figuring out ways to innovate and be creative. As I mentioned earlier, we have an army, a small army, nonetheless, of theater people on our staff, writers and directors and actors, and I don't think that's a coincidence. And I think about Moses who did not actually design the Mishkan. He worked with a guy named Bezalel and Oholiav, and they were basically the artists in residence whose artistic and strategic vision created the structures that allowed the work and the spiritual energy to flow. So I mention all of that because over the years, we have leaned on the talents of artists, and one specifically, Rebecca Stevens, who comes with a design background in experience design and performance art. And she has helped us design spiritual experiences for the past 7 years. She's worked with me to build games, table games for Passover, to make sure that hundreds of people attending a Seder aren't just sitting back being passively entertained by a reader at the front of the room, but are actively engaged. She's designed high holiday spiritual scavenger hunts, the mishmash groups, any small groups that we're doing right now, and all of our in-person offerings have Rebecca's fingerprints on them. And she just joined our full-time staff as Director of Strategy and Design. She's basically our Bezalel. And this is allowing for a deepening of that artistic sensibility across all of our work, including our family programs. We're really excited about this. So as we move into hearing the prophetic words of Isaiah, I know that's a little awkward of a segue because he's not exactly a guy known in Jewish literature for the artfulness of his rhetoric or delivery. He's sort of like a guy with a megaphone on a soapbox, or a person who's just saying things that nobody wants to hear, but that we all need to hear. And that's why the rabbis put him front and center on Yom Kippur, the most well-attended synagogue day of the year, is precisely because this guy, Isaiah, has a message that is timeless, that is vital, and that none of us really wants to encounter if we're being honest with ourselves, because it could make us very uncomfortable. Yom Kippur is actually about experiencing discomfort, not performing it just by fasting and, wearing white and abstaining from leather and sex and food and drink, but by really encountering the things that make us uncomfortable. And in order to do that and not run away, we need artfulness, and we need to think about how we integrate this into our lives. And that is why Rebecca is going to help unpack it with us after Eli delivers our Haftarah. So thank you, Eli, for rendering Isaiah for us. And thank you, Rebecca, for helping us integrate what religion is really supposed to be about on an experiential level to help transform us and transform the world. Here we go.
Amen. Kira vagaron al tachsoch. Kashofar heram kolecha v'haged le'ami pish'am ulevet Yaakov chatotam ve'oti yom yom yidroshun v'da'at derachai yechpetsun kegoy Asher tzedakah yasa umishpat Elohav lo azav Yishaluni mishpetei tzedek kirvat Elohim yechpatsun lama samnu velo ra'ita ininu Nafshechnu velo teda hen vayom tzomchem timtzu chefetz v'chol atzvechem tingosu hen lariv umatzah tatsumu ulhakot באגרוף רשע, לא תצומו חיים, להשמיע במרום כוחם, החזה יהיה צום, אבחרהו יום, ענות אדם נפשו, הלכוף כאגמון, ראשו ושק ואפר יציע, הלזה תקרא צום ויום רצון לאדוני. הלא זה צום אבחרהו, פתח חרצובות רשע, התר אגודות מותה, ושלח רצוצים חפשים, וחומותה תנתקו. הלא פרוס לרעב לחכמך, ועניים מרודים תביא בית, כי תראה ערום וכיסיתו, ומבשרך לא תתעלם. אז יבעק כשחר אורך, וארוחתך מהרה תצמח, והלך לפניך צדקך, כבוד אדוני יאספך. אז תקרא ואדוני יענה, תשווה ויאמר, הנני אם תסיר מתוכך מותה, שלח אצבע ודבר אבן, ותפק לרעב נפשך, ונפש נענה תשביע, וזרח בחושך אורך, ואפלתך כצהריים. ונכחך אדוני תמיד, והשביע בצחצחות נפשך, ועצמותיך יחליץ, והיית כגן רבה, וכמות שמים אשר לא יכזבו מימיו. ובנו ממך חרבות עולם, מוסדי דור ודור תקומם, וקורא לך גודר פרץ, משובב נתבות לשבת, אם תסיב משבת רגליך, עשות חפציך ביום קדשי, וקראת לשבת העונג, לקדוש אדוני מכובד, וכיבדתו מעשות דרכך, ממצוא חפצך, ודבר דבר אז, תתענג על אדוני, והרכתיך
al bimavte aretz v'ha'achlaticha nachalat Yaakov avicha ki pi Adonai diber.
I want to start by admitting that there's a kind of despair that settles in me during Yom Kippur. I am so far from being the person I think I should be. The world is so far from being a place that is good or kind or fair. I am complicit in how terrible the world is for so many. For all the talk of being grateful for the chance to reflect, for the chance to improve, I know the truth. It's hopeless. I really hate this feeling. And the problem is that this feeling has spilled out past the bounds of Yom Kippur onto the calendar. The West Coast is locked inside as ash rains down. The Midwest is locked inside as the pandemic rises. The South evacuates as hurricanes surge. We don't even know how to begin to count our dead. More and more of us are beginning to arrive at what feels like a truth. It's hopeless. The environmental writer Eric Dean Wilson writes, "Whether we like it or not, a confrontation with our limits, our own demise certainly, but for the moment I mean the limits of our way of life, our nation, and perhaps the global organization of humanity, seems to be arriving quite soon. In response, I often hear variations on the question, is there hope to solve the climate crisis? In all honesty, when I hear that question, is there hope? I'm not sure I understand what's being asked." Wilson lingers on this question about our climate crisis, but it's also the question I land on mid-morning on Yom Kippur. Is there hope? Wilson points out that this question often means, do we get to continue on like this? Can we promise this is as bad as it will get? Will the costs be minimal? Will my people be safe? Will I be comfortable? One could plausibly reword this question as, can we still be optimistic about what happens next? Rabbi Jonathan Sachs reminds us that historically, Jews haven't found much use for optimism. He writes, "One of the most important distinctions I have learned in the course of reflection on Jewish history is the difference between optimism and hope. Knowing what we do of our past, no Jew can be an optimist. But Jews have never, despite a history of sometimes awesome suffering, given up hope." What precisely is hope without optimism? What does it look like to have hope in a world that we are not optimistic about? Sachs suggests, those who hope refuse to be comforted while the hoped-for outcome is not yet reached. That is why, when the prophets saw evil in the world, they refused to be comforted. On Yom Kippur, we seemingly practice self-denial, that is to say, personal discomfort, to atone for where we have missed the mark. The plan, more or less, is that by occupying a state of discomfort for 25 hours, we reconcile with God. But then, like clockwork every year, the prophet Isaiah storms into the service just as we've settled in to let us know that he knows what we're up to, and he's definitely not impressed. He asks, is this the fast I want? A day for people to starve their bodies? You call that a fast? A day when Adonai will look upon you with favor? Isaiah's blistering evaluation of our performative act of penance, which rings out in this beautiful translation by Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, is followed by instructions that are as direct and clear as they are seemingly impossible. This is the fast I want. Unlock the chains of wickedness. Untie the knots of servitude. Let the oppressed go free, their bonds broken. Share your bread with the hungry and welcome the homeless into your home. When you see the naked, clothe them. All people are your kin. Do not ignore them. This directive is not unfamiliar to us. Its general outline forms the backbone of most major religions. Do a better job taking care of others, particularly those less fortunate than you. We hear it every year, and most of us agree and feel some degree of shame of how we don't dedicate more of our energy to healing the world. And we admire the people that do. And we go back to our busy, exhausting, complicated lives, trying to squeeze in some amount of contributing to make the world a better place. This year, as disaster rains down around us, I hear what Isaiah promises is on the other side of remaking the world. I hear him say, if we do this, then you will rebuild yourselves. You will restore foundations laid long ago. You will be known as the one who restores what has fallen. This year, I hear this promise, and I think, oh, thank God, someone has a plan. The thing about this plan is that it strikes us as unrealistic because it is so large and requires fundamental shifts in how we operate. But Isaiah suggests to us that our inward focus on Yom Kippur is misplaced, and that we should think not at the individual level, but at the collective one. Thinking collectively is massively difficult. Acting collectively is even harder. Solving homelessness, hunger, oppression, these things seem like good ideas, but too large to make any real progress on. And because they are so large, many of us don't take tangible steps towards making this progress. In an article published in The Atlantic in January of this year, Eaton Hirsch, a professor of political science at Tufts University, shared the data from his 2018 survey on political engagement. In it, he determined that those who were college educated reported they spend more time on politics than other Americans do. But less than 2% of that time involves volunteering in political organizations. The rest is spent mostly on news consumption, 41% of the time, discussion and debate, 26%, and contemplating politics alone, 21%. Not everyone in our community went to college, and not everyone fits into the statistic of how they spend their time. But it's worth saying. We're spending 88% of our time reading, watching, thinking, and discussing. Sort of like how most of us are spending all of Yom Kippur. Isaiah would probably suggest we increase that 2% of action, at least by a few percentage points. Now, an obvious critique of this is that being involved in politics is not the only way to contribute to the common good. So I want to broaden my point to suggest that most of the time we think about prayer as reading, thinking, and talking, and these days watching screens. And just as it might help us to think about politics as actually comprised of action, prayer might be comprised of action as well. I say this in part because my own experience of prayer has so little to do with reading or speaking. I would tell you that I am not particularly religious and generally not observant, which is true. Except, of course, that I am the director of strategy and design at Mishkan, Chicago, and I spend all day, and lately a lot of the night, working on religious services. If it got to be a little later in that dinner party, and you asked me why I converted to Judaism, I would give you a bunch of reasons about love and marriage and family and culture and child rearing. And then if you pressed me, I would probably admit that when it came down to it, believing in God seems more interesting to me than simply ruling it out. I still haven't ruled it out, but I've never in my life had a conversation with God. Except, of course, nearly every holiday any of you have attended in the past 5 years here at Mishkan has had my attention on it. I do not think of myself as someone who prays, but I am always shaping how we pray together. To me, this is what the poet Mary Oliver is getting at when she says, I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. On a day designated for prayer, I want to simply suggest that we pray all year with our attention and how we choose to focus it. This is what I think Isaiah might be kicking in the proverbial door to say. Our fast means nothing if our attention, and by extension our actions, are in the wrong place. So, I'll return to my question. Is there hope? Or maybe the better version of this question. What does it mean to hope in a world that we are not optimistic about? I'll answer like this. I have a child born into lockdown on April 3rd, born into a hospital so strained for resources at the time that I gave birth that when I asked a doctor, "Will you have enough masks?" he said to me, "I hope so." Born at a moment when tests were so scarce that we entered the hospital untested, and my husband was not allowed to leave my delivery room for 4 days. The first question many people asked me when I told them my son had arrived was your husband able to be there while you delivered? My child was born into 2020, and he'll only know the world going forward, not the world we grieve and wish we could return to. In the heat of an extraordinarily hot summer, as the sounds of ambulances mingled with the sounds of helicopters, as the pandemic met the protests, I sat up late at night, holding a newborn, and thinking about what he will need to live in this world and what I might hope for him. What I have come up with is that he will need to understand that he is indelibly linked to other people, that his fate lies with theirs, that he must have both resilience and grace to not just survive the crises into which he is born, but to find meaning and joy within them. This, I think, is what Isaiah brings to us midway through this day. Our fate is linked to other people we choose and people we don't choose. It will be our ability to act collectively, the ability to direct and sustain our attention that will bring the possibility of a livable world, what version we have no idea, into view. May you be inscribed in the book of life. May each of us make it to this point next year. And if we do, may we be reminded that it will be because of what we choose to pay attention to between this day of fasting and the next, how we choose to pray when we leave this day behind. I wish for you the sort of hope that you can build as a sukkah, a shelter, and invite in others from the storm that is raging.
Yada da da ya yada ya yada yo. Yada 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 yo. Yada yada yo. Yada da ya yada yada yo. Yada yada. Yada,
Adonai ma'adam v'teda'ehu ben enosh v'tachashvehu. Adam lahevel dama yamav ketzel over. Limnot yameinu ken hoda v'navi levav chokhmah. God, what are we that you are mindful of us? Of what importance are we in your universe? We exist just for an instant. Our days are like a fleeting shadow. But then again, you have made us only a little less than divine. You have crowned us with glory and beauty. Teach us to treasure each day, that we may cultivate a heart of wisdom. One Art by the poet Elizabeth Bishop. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seemed filled with the intent to be lost, that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster. Places and names, and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I miss them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture. I love. I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster. The art of losing seems like it shouldn't be hard to master. Death is, after all, the only thing guaranteed any of us in our lives, and we will meet death throughout our lives, always at the wrong time, even if it was our loved one's time. The art of losing seems like it shouldn't be too hard to master. Death is all around us. We're reading about it daily. We're reading about so much of it, perhaps, that our hearts have become somewhat numb to death. So you might think the art of losing shouldn't be hard to master, except when it's not a statistic in the paper. But it's your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, your child, your best friend. Then losing is indeed a disaster, even though the art of losing shouldn't be hard to master. And the only other people who understand this are people who share this sacred, painful fellowship of loss. Yizkor, this fellowship of loss, this is the time we set aside to formally include in our prayers, in our davening, the family and friends that have died more expansively and at greater length than we do for mourners Kaddish during every other service. You may know this Ashkenazi custom, which is that if you have 2 living parents, you sit this service out because inevitably you too will join this sacred fellowship of loss. But until then, you should go call your mother or your father. You should enjoy who you have while you have them. And I want to say, there's another theory, which is that mourners need someone in the room to say Amen as you're saying Kaddish. So it's not everyone's custom to sit this service out. So if you are here now and you intend to stay, maybe there's somebody else who you're remembering, you are welcome in this sacred fellowship of loss. No one chooses to be here. No one takes pleasure in joining this fellowship. and thank God for the time and space that our tradition gives to honor those who shaped us so that we can cry and laugh and remember. Among the aspects of in-person prayer that are the most challenging during these times, I think this, morning practices, and specifically saying Kaddish in a minyan, are the most challenging to do at a distance. So we're going to just have to bridge that distance with our hearts and our intentions, wrapping our collective arms around each other and supporting each other in our shared losses, even at a distance, knowing we are here with you. So many of us, millions of Jews around the world today who share this fellowship of loss, are here with you. So we recite Yizkor on each of the major Jewish festivals, but I think the high holidays, as we're thinking about our lives, big picture, and who we are and who shaped us and who loved us into being, I think we feel more connected to those who we've lost today, and more people show up to Yom Kippur Yizkor than at any other point in the year. Also, the rituals of the day bring us closer to the realm of the angels and the spirits. It almost feels like the veil between the world of the living and the world of the dead is a little more transparent. Grief is hard to pin down, hard to describe, hard to predict. The author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, wrote recently in a New Yorker article called Notes on Grief about her father's death this summer. She said, "We don't know how we will grieve until we grieve. I don't particularly like t-shirts, but I spent 4 hours on a customization website designing t-shirts to memorialize my father, trying out fonts and colors and images. On some, I put his initials, and on others, the Igbo words Okemenia or Oelienia, which are similar in meaning, both meaning her father's daughter, but more exultant, more pride-struck. Often, I pause to cry. Often, I think of what he would think of them. He viewed my interest in fashion, especially less conventional choices, with an accepting amusement. He would approve of some t-shirts, I think. It is design as therapy, filling the silences I choose, because I must spare my loved ones my endless roiling thoughts. I must conceal how hard grief's iron clamp is. I finally understand why people get tattoos of those they have lost. The need to proclaim not merely the loss, but the love, the continuity. I am my father's daughter. It is an act of resistance and refusal. Grief telling you that it is over and your heart saying that it is not. Grief trying to shrink your love to the past and your heart saying that it is present. It does not matter whether I want to be changed, because I am changed. Some of you are here to remember parents who watched over you and nursed you and stayed up late with you and cried with you about things that felt really important to you at the time and that they knew were insignificant in the grand scheme, but they took seriously just to support you as a kid and as a teenager and as a young adult. And as a parent, they were proud of you, even though they sometimes didn't say it. And they made all manner of sacrifices for you, for which you will never be able to fully pay back or even truly, really acknowledge. Some of you are here to remember a wife or a husband, a partner, and maybe someone with whom you were truly united in hopes and pains and frustrations and failures and achievements, a person with whom you created a home, raised kids, raised pets, traveled, went to the theater and to movies, just sat around the house. Some of you are remembering siblings, brothers and sisters who shared the youthful adventures of childhood and adolescence, and with whom you had ongoing relationships into adulthood as you began to care for your aging parents. Some of you are here to remember your children, entrusted to you for far too brief a period of time, whom you cared for and whose lives were enriched by your love. You may be here to remember grandparents or uncles or aunts or cousins or other relatives, people who you loved who loved you, people who weren't perfect. And in your remembering them today, you hold all of them, the good stuff and the stuff that you choose now to walk a different direction, in the other direction away from, without judgment, accepting what they gave you that was a gift. All of the people you're remembering today left a hole. And so in reciting El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayers for them, you bring them a little bit closer and you bring yourself a little bit closer to them. We say in this prayer, Utsror b'tzror ha'chaim, let their memory be bound up in the bonds of the living. It's often translated as the bonds of eternal life. But that happens on its own, that their memories should be bound up in the bonds of the living, which is to say, in your memories, in your conversations, in your hearts. That's the thing that we say out loud and we pray for to make it so. I pray that memories and prayers for your loved ones today bring you comfort and sustain you as you bring them close and we say Kaddish for them. So we're going to give you some space now to say El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayers yourself. They are on page 250 and 251 in the Machzor that we're using, the Ratzon Machzor. We'll also have the words up on the screen. And then we'll sing these words together. And then we'll say Kaddish. And then after Kaddish, 50 of you sent in Yizkor submissions, pictures and words about people who you're thinking about this year at Yizkor. And so we'll sing Psalm 23 as we look at those memories, as we share those memories together. And if you didn't submit, I invite you now to get your phone out and pull up pictures, or pull a photo album down off a shelf and really use this time to bring their memories alive into the fore. Grab a box of Kleenex and let's remember together.
רחמים שוכן במרומים המציא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמות כל אלה שהלכו לעולמם, בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתם. בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום על משכבותם. ונאמר אמן.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
ויעלמה דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו
אמן.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם לא נעלמיה.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקדושה
בריחו.
לעילה לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן ועלמה ואמרו יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו
אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו
אמן. אמן.
גם כי אלה בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי, שיתך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני.
תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צוהריי, דשנת שמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה, רוויה.
כוסי רוויה, רוויה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor B'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chazdei Avot V'Imahot U'Mevi Goel Livnei B'neihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava Misod Chachamim U'Nevonim U'Milemedat Mevinim Eftach Afi V'Tfilah V'Tachanunim Lechalot U'Lechanen Pnei Melech Malei Rachamim Adonai Ha'adonim Zoreinu Lechaim Melech Hafetz B'Chaim V'chotveinu V'Sefer HaChaim L'ma'ach Elohim Chaim Melech Ozer u'Mosheh u'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham u'Foked Sarah Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai Mechayei Metim Ata Rav Lehoshia Morid Ata Mechakeh Chaim B'Chesed Mechayei Metim B'Rachamim Rabim Somech Noflim V'Rofeh Cholim U'Matir Asurim U'Mekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar Michamocha Ba'al Gevurot Umi Domelach Melech Meimit U'Mechayeh U'Matzmiach Yeshua Michamocha Alfa Rachamim Zocher Yetzurav Lechaim Berachamim Lechaim Berachamim V'neheman atah lahachayot metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei HaMetim Amen.
If we read the Bible carefully, we may notice that there's actually not a lot of difference between humans, God, and angels. Humans, after all, are made in the image of God. We experience many of the same emotions. We care about a lot of the same things. The main thing that separates us, humanity, from the divine beings is that we are born and we will die. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur prompt us to consider this difference very acutely. And the Unatana Tokef prayer that we're about to say is sort of the pinnacle of this consideration. It forces us to reckon with all of the ways that our bodies are vulnerable, that we may not live another year. And yet on Yom Kippur, we're supposed to be like angels. We're supposed to step out of some of our fleshy, worldly concerns. We deny our body food and water and intimate relations with others so that we can be like the angels. We stand all day because angels are reportedly never able to sit. So as we say the Unatana Tokef prayer today, and then we move right into the Kedusha, we experience this drama in a little microcosm. We go from the depths of despair, the depths of considering our own mortality, into emulating the angels, singing their songs in their way. It can be a really hard transition. It's really hard to go from thinking about how you or your loved ones might die to considering an eternal life. So I want to share with you a quote from one of my favorite teachers, Rabbi Eliezer Diamond. He talks about this transition from considering our own earthly mortality to our connection to divinity and infinity. And he writes, "Where does this leave us? In the end, while our time on earth is brief, the length of our days and the manner of their end unknown, we, like God, are holy, and we increase our own holiness and God's through a life of holiness. A metaphor that's helpful to me," he writes, "and I hope to you, is that of an orchestra playing a perpetual symphony. Each of us is given an instrument and notes to play, the violin, perhaps percussion, woodwinds. But the symphony is incomplete without our performance. We're given the gift of playing a few notes, a few bars, and then someone else takes our part. But that brief period playing in the orchestra, of being part of the performance, lifts us up, and we transcend mortality and the prospect of ephemerality. As God's instruments, we count. We matter. We are temporary manifestations of an eternal reality. That is the promise and challenge of the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays. That is the promise and challenge of life itself. So as we say the Unatana Tokef, we list these ways in which we may not be written for another year of life. Someone we know may not be written for another year of life. And we remind ourselves that there are things we can do to change not what happens, but the way we feel about it. I want to invite you to see yourself as part of this symphony. That what matters not is when we end, but how we spend the time before our end comes.
Unatana Tokef Kedushat Hayom, Ki hu nora ve'ayom. ובו תינשא מלכותך ויכון חסד כיסך ותשב עליו באמת. אמת כי אתה הוא דיין ומוכיח ויודע ועד וחותם וחוסר וחותם וסופר ומונה. ותזכור כל הנשכחות ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות מלאה יקרא וחותם יד כל אדם בו. You bring to mind all that is forgotten. You open up the book in which all is recorded, and it tells you everything that we've done, for the book is written in each one of our own hand. Ubashofar gadol yitaka, ubakol dmama, daka yishama.
בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור ייחתמו בראש השנה ייכתבו וביום צום כיפור ייחתמו והמים, מי וחרב ומי וחיה, מי ורעב ומי וצמא, מי ורעש ומי ומגפה, מי וחניקה ומי וסקילה, בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו, בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו. מי ינוח ומי ינוח, מי ישקיט ומי יטורף, מי ישלם ומי יתייסר, מי יעני ומי יעשיר, מי יושפל ומי ירום, בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו.
Join us.
בראש השנה ייכתבו, וביום צום כיפור יחתמו. ותשובה
ותשובה
ותפילה
ותפילה
וצדקה
וצדקה
ותשובה
ותשובה
ותפילה
ותפילה
וצדקה
וצדקה
ותשובה
ותשובה
ותפילה
ותפילה
וצדקה
וצדקה
ותשובה
ותשובה
ותפילה
ותפילה
וצדקה ותשובה
ותשובה
ותפילה
ותפילה
וצדקה
וצדקה
ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים את הגזרה. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו, קדוש קדוש
אדוני במקומו, אדוני במקומו, ברוך הארץ אדוני במקומו, ברוך הארץ אדוני במקומו, קדוש קדוש אדוני במקומו, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו, קדוש קדוש אדוני לעולם, ברוך אלוהי במקומו,
Good morning. You're still here. Mazel tov. Congratulations. You are hardcore. If you're still here, you are so hardcore. Pat yourself on the back. Oh, that feels good. Okay. I want to invite all of us right now in the midst of, I know the fast is beginning to kick in the midst of a little bit of the discomfort on the inside, which I know, I talked about it last night. It's good for us. It pushes us. It's resistance training. Doing hard things inside teaches us to do hard things on the outside. Let's give ourselves a little massage. If you haven't already taken that hand, dug into some of those muscles in your shoulders, do it with your right hand. I just recommend it so highly. If there's somebody else in the room who can do this for you, great. But, I think the human body was designed with this in mind, with the idea of us being able to relieve a little bit of our own stress and tension. Just give yourself a massage. All right. Okay, both hands. So, all right, I'm just going to do some stretching. You're invited to follow what I'm doing here as I speak. Just reach up into the air. If you want to stand up, great. I'm not going to stand up because that would then mean making you nauseous holding the computer and, changing the angle and whatever. So I'm just going to stretch to the left and to the right. And to breathe in deeply to your rib cage, to your diaphragm. Right? Like food and water nourishes us, but not nearly as much as breath. Breath gives us what we need to at least live for a couple days without food and water. So we can do this. You can do this. You can do this, and just consider this discomfort that comes with the fast, like the kind of hurts so good kind of discomfort. You're being in your stretch zone. Your stretch zone, like what we're doing, You can't grow without stretching. You can't grow without stretching. And, there's like the panic zone. There's the zone where it's like you can't learn and you can't grow because you're just too scared to move. So that's not what we're talking about. And there's also your comfort zone, which is like you're just so comfortable that that growth doesn't happen there either. But there's a zone in between. We don't often talk about your stretch zone. And that's, I think, where Yom Kippur lives. And in that stretch zone is the possibility for great joy. I wanted to make sure that we talked about that today because I know we live in intense times and Yom Kippur is an intense day. And there is the possibility that you might think that this day is supposed to be sad somehow. It can be serious. It is very serious, actually. It can feel somber, even. It's not sad, per se. And the reason why is because, yes, while the knocking on our chest, the waking ourselves up, the naming for ourselves the ways in which we have fallen short, and in which others have fallen short. And we're still, holding grudges, holding on to that burning coal, that we're hoping one day to throw at them. And in the meantime is burning a hole in our own hand. This is hard. It's not easy stuff. And the reason why we have a whole day devoted to it, let alone every single Amidah throughout the whole year, where we knock on our heart just a little bit over the course of the year, 3 times a day. But on Yom Kippur, it's as a whole day we devote to this because it's hard, but not because it's sad. It's actually the opposite. Embedded in this day is the possibility for transformation, for change, for growth, for stretching ourselves. And, it's an incredible thing what happens when we stretch. We can change. And so I want to invite you in a moment to stand up with us, to sing and to dance and to embody the joy that our tradition actually says this day is about. There are 2 most joyful days on the calendar, the Talmud says. One is Tu B'Av in the summer, and the other is Yom Kippur. They were days when young women would go out into the field and dress in white in borrowed clothes so that nobody would know who was rich and who was poor, and go and find love. And I just think, we don't know what this next year holds. I think there's a lot of fear, and I certainly feel it too. But that is all the more reason to harness and amplify and embody our joy. So join me and join us, stand up, v'yitnu lecha keter melucha, and we acknowledge and we crown love, King, as the direction we want to move our transformation in.
ויצאו כל עבדיך
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
ויברכו שם כבודך
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
ויגידו ועם צדקך
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
ורוממוך בקהלם
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
וישמעו רחוקים ויבואו
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה כתר מלוכה
ויתנו לך 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 כתר מלוכה
Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Chus verachem Aleinu.
Chus verachem Aleinu.
V'kaber berachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu.
V'kabel berachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu.
V'kabel
berachamim uvratzon
et tefilateinu. Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Chus verachem Aleinu.
Chus verachem Aleinu.
V'kabel merachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu.
V'kabel berachamim uvratzon
et tefilateinu. V'kabel merachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu. Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Shema Koleinu.
Chus verachem Aleinu.
Chus verachem Aleinu.
V'kabel berachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu.
V'kabel berachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu. V'kabel berachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu.
Shema
Hello, I'm Caspar ter Keil, the author of The Power of Ritual, and I'm so glad to be with you here today. You might have heard that the health and well-being industry has grown to be a $4.2 trillion business. The growth of boutique fitness gyms, of more and more complicated skincare rituals every morning, and of course the ever-present diet world has contributed to the growth of this industry. And often the language that's used to describe it falls under the umbrella of self-care. Now, despite its important radical roots of that term, we use it today to kind of describe the responsibility that we each have to solve our own problems, to make ourselves well, to make ourselves healthy. And I find it a very dangerous idea. It's sort of the progressive version of a pull yourself up by your own bootstraps ideology, because it reveals a core lie at the heart of American culture, which is the focus on individualism. It's nearly a sort of religious adherence that we have for individualism. And it's why I'm so passionate about communal practices, rituals that bring us together, that we practice together, whether it's singing and dancing, eating together, or indeed praying together, as you're about to do. So often we practice these rituals not because they're tailored perfectly for the individual, but because by doing it together, we share with one another something that we couldn't do just by ourselves. It breaks that lie that we can all make ourselves well. We need each other. We are one another's medicine. And so often with communal practices, what it can do is that it can help expose the lies that we tell ourselves, whether we think we're better than everyone else, we're kind of brought down into humility, or when we think we're worse than anyone else, more shameful. It reminds us that we are inherently part of one another's world and cannot be excluded from it. So as you enter this time of communal prayer, I invite you to lean into these words, not just for yourself, but as a gift to the people around you, even if they're not sitting next to you physically, the other people who are praying with you in this moment. Because I think these communal prayers help us remember the equally true story of community that sits next to the one of individuality. I'm so grateful for all of you and for Mishkan, and wish you every blessing here from the UK. All my best. Thank you.
Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, tavo lefanecha tfilatenu, v'al titalem mitchinatenu. Our God and God of our ancestors, may our prayer arise before you. Don't turn a deaf ear to our cries. שאין אנחנו עזי פנים וקשי עורף לומר לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו צדיקים אנחנו, ולא חטאנו. אבל אנחנו חטאנו. We are not so arrogant or stubborn to speak in your presence, God and God of our fathers and our mothers, and say, we are so righteous and we have not sinned. For indeed, we have sinned. So I invite you to just strike your heart a little. You can also put a hand on your heart as we say each one of these words, which we say, by the way, in the plural, because we may not be guilty of all of these things, but collectively we take care of each other and we help each other stay on the straight and narrow. And when somebody trips and falls, we're all sort of responsible for helping each other up. And so we all say each one of these together, because this is really all of us. Ay, 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 ay. Ashamnu, Ashamnu, Baganu, Baganu, Gazalnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, Dibarnu Dofi. תפלנו שקר.
וממשפטיך טובים ולא שבה לנו, ואתה צדיק על כל הבעלינו, כי אמת עשית, ואנחנו הרשנו.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך במידת זנות, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בווידוי פה. For the sin that we've sinned before you by acquiescing in immorality, for the sin that we've sinned before you by expressing empty confessions. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזלזול הורים ומורים, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בזדון ובשגגה. For the sin that we've sinned before you by disrespecting parents and teachers, for the sin that we've sinned before you intentionally and accidentally. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחוזק יד, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחילול השם. For the sin we've sinned before you by abuse of power, for the sin that we've sinned before you by acting so as to desecrate God's name. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בטומאת שפתיים, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בטיפשות פה. For the sin that we've sinned before you by speaking hypocritically, for the sin that we've sinned before you by speaking foolishly. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך ביודעים ובלא יודעים. For the sin that we've sinned before you with our evil inclination, for the sin that we've sinned before you knowingly and not knowingly. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכחש ובכזב, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בכפת שוחד. For the sin that we've sinned before you by making false promises and lying, for the sin that we've sinned before you by taking bribes. Ve'al kulam Eloi selichot, selach lanu mechal lanu ka'al חטא שחטאנו לפניך בלצון, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בלשון הרע.
For the sin that we have sinned before you by mocking, for the sin that we have sinned before you by speaking ill of others.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך במשוא ומתן, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך במאכל ובמשתה.
For the sin that we have sinned before you in commercial dealings, for the sin that we have sinned before you in eating and drinking.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בנשך ובמרבית, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בנטיית גרון.
For the sin that we have sinned before you in taking advantage of others' difficulties, for the sin that we have sinned before you in pridefulness.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשיח שפתותינו, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בשיכור עין.
For the sin that we have sinned before you in idle conversations, for the sin that we have sinned before you by wanton glances.
על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעיניים רמות, על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בעזות מצח.
For the sin that we have sinned before you by supercilious glances,
for the sin that we have sinned before you by inappropriate boldness. ועל כולם אלוהיו סליחות, סלח לנו נחל לנו כפר לנו. ועל כולם אלוהיו סליחות, סלח לנו נחל לנו, סלח לנו נחל לנו כפר לנו.
שים שלום טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו וכל כל ישראל, עמך ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד, כולנו כאחד באור פניך, כי באור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו תורת חיים ואהבת חסד וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום וחיים ושלום וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך, לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה, ניזכר וניכתב לפניך. אנחנו בכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום.
Shana Tova.